We do hope to have them in a library for our members in the near future. And one quick plug, we do count on people to join. It's $40 a year for parents and educators, $60 a year for mental health professionals. And we've now just started an online resource directory. So those that join at the professional level, it's $100. They can apply, and we're hoping that a lot more people will be able to access those that we know are great in the world of ADHD, instead of, having to call or chat with somebody. It might just be a little faster. So I am going to be quiet now, and I'm going to turn this over. Dr. Adams, I just discovered a couple of weeks ago, so I'm going to let you introduce yourself and tell us what's important. Thank you very much for being here.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for having me, and thanks for the intro, Pam. Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. John Adams. I'm a postdoctoral fellow at the Tarnow Center for Self-Management in Houston. So what postdoctoral fellow means is that I finished my PhD this past summer. And so I'm currently earning my hours to be a licensed psychologist. So you can call me doctor or John Adams PhD, but you can't technically call me a psychologist because I don't technically have the license yet. So that is what all that's about. Everyone here at my practice, and myself included, are passionate about supporting youth and adults with ADHD. And this is an especially interesting time to be coping with aspects of that diagnosis. And so I thought it'd be fun and a good opportunity to talk through some of those things with you all and provide support. And so I will go ahead and share my slides here, and we will dive in. So give me one moment to get that going and kind of move some windows around. Okay, can everybody see the slideshow?
Yes.
Okay, getting nods, good,
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm glad to hear that. Okay, and then you may have overheard Pam and I talking about like having your cameras on. As a presenter, it's definitely helpful for me to be able to see your faces and talk to you, see your reactions as I'm going. And so if you're comfortable, I invite you to. However, I also understand it can be uncomfortable being on camera all day. I've been virtual, and been a virtual therapist for quite some time. And so I understand the screen fatigue and the camera fatigue. And so if for you, being a part of this is having your camera off and doing something else, or just feeling more comfortable that way, that is totally fine. And that's no judgment there. You're invited to do that too. Okay, well, I decided to give this the whimsical title, Attention Deficit Holiday Dysfunction, because ADHD can cause lots of problems during this time of year. So we will dive in. Okay, so our general outline, making sure to set expectations, as anyone should be doing for anyone who has ADHD. Oh, I see a little one is joining us. Hello. So things I want to do at the very beginning, I want to get acquainted a little bit, just go around quickly and just hear from you. Primarily, I already see your names on screen, of course, but if you are a parent of an ADHD child, if you have your ADHD yourself, or both, knowing kind of my constituency of the audience can help me know which parts of this to spend more time on and which parts to maybe breeze past a little bit, if we're leaning one or the other direction for our audience today. Then we'll briefly just touch on features of ADHD that, of course, I'm sure you're all familiar with, but just to sort of set our groundwork. Then we'll talk about unique stressors for adults and parents that come up during this time of year, and then talk about how those things interact, how those symptoms and how those stressors can show up. Now, we don't have the full time for me to talk about every symptom of ADHD, so the ones identified to spend some time on today are distractibility, forgetting and making mistakes, time management challenges, and that high energy hyperactivity piece. And then on the back end, we'll talk about some strategies for children during this time of year. And we'll talk about strategies for adults, both parents of ADHD kids, as well as adults with ADHD themselves, or parents who have ADHD, whose kids also have ADHD, which happens plenty because ADHD has a genetic component. And then at the end, well, I'll give you all space for any kind of questions you'll have. I'll do my best to answer questions. You're also welcome to like chime in either in the chat box or some other way with questions during. Actually see, okay, so we've got one, all of the above in the chat box for saying, yeah, parents with ADHD. And then one person says, my son has ADHD. Other folks, I guess if you want to post in the chat, where you fall in those audiences, please do so. I'll give a moment for folks to put that in the chat. Son and husband, little one that made an appearance has ADHD. Okay. And then for the sake of transparency, I had a sister who had ADHD, and then, have my aspects of ADHD as well. Full criteria, I'm not sure, but certainly have some pieces I can relate to. Kids have ADHD, learning that we parents probably do too. Yeah, that's interesting, right? That's sort of coming to acknowledge the ways it's been a part of your life. One said AD, another doctor said, my son has ADHD. So brief clarity on that. The language there is really just related to this book that changes every like 10 years or so. This is the DSM-5. So we used to differentiate it as ADD and ADHD. Now the title for the diagnoses overall in the newest version of the DSM is just ADHD, and then there's hyperactive type, inattentive type, and combined. And so inattentive type is what we used to call just plain ADD. ADHD, as we used to call it, is now ADHD hyperactive. And then combined is when you both struggle with the inattentive as well as the hyperactive symptoms. Does that make sense? Okay, got some nods. Appreciate the nods. Thanks, everybody. Okay, well, that seems to answer my question. We've got a good blend of everybody, which is what Pam said would likely happen, which is why I structured this talk this way. So that is helpful to know. Okay, so let's go ahead and get in here. So that was the getting acquainted. Okay, so our features, so getting more into those diagnoses pieces that I was just talking about. So on the inattention side, we've got making careless mistakes, distractibility, and difficulty sustaining attention, seeming like it's not really listening like someone, and maybe it's because they're so focused on one task or they're just sort of zoning out and looking at the squirrel outside, right? Failing to complete tasks or follow through, starting a project and leaving it there. You ever look around your house and feel like you started 4 different chores but finished none of them because in the middle of it you thought of the other one to do? That's what that's about. Having a difficult time organizing and doing time management, avoiding tasks that require much concentration because that feels hard to sustain that attention, misplacing things, and being forgetful. That's all on the inattentive side. So on the hyperactive or impulsive side, we have fidgeting with hands or feet, just feeling kind of restless. This symptom has bloomed an entire market of various different fidget toys and spinners and gadgets, right? Trouble sitting still, subjective feelings of restlessness, just like not wanting to stay in place, having difficulty engaging in leisure activities quietly, not making a lot of noise, always being on the go, having a motor that just keeps running, talking excessively, blurting out answers. That's some of that impulsivity, right, of not having the executive functioning to rein in that desire to have that thing come out of your mouth. Having difficulty awaiting a turn and interrupting other people. These are all things that can come up. Briefly, I guess, pausing. If anybody wants to throw in the chat any other symptoms that you feel like you've noticed as a part of your life as someone with ADHD, or that you've seen in your children that you're like, this also seems like it's a big part of ADHD, feel free to throw that in the chat. I always like hearing about people's lived experiences of these diagnoses. We'll go ahead and move on to the next slide, but again, welcome to throw those in the chat. Okay. So some stressors that are going to show up at this time of year. Let's see, hold on, I see something in the chat. Emotional roller coaster. Yes. Trouble regulating emotions. Yeah. So I think in general, like a theme here of ADHD is struggling with executive functioning, right? So that's the stuff right here in your frontal cortex. Hold on, pausing. Yep, transitions are big as well. Right, so the prefrontal cortex, this is where we regulate ourselves. And when we're children already, this is underdeveloped. We're working on it. It's hard to rein ourselves in. The fact that that's not developed is why we are understanding when a 4-year-old is running everywhere and screaming, because it's just because of their brain. You just kind of have to wait it out as the brain develops. But when you have a kid who already has, that part of the brain is still growing, and it's hard for them to use the capacity that they should be able to at that age, quote unquote, should struggle to. That also applies to regulating emotions too, right? That same difficulty using executive functioning applies to regulating feelings as well. Okay, so some stressors that can show up during the holidays. There's such high expectation set at this time of year. There's this demand that everything has to be perfect. The turkey has to be delicious, even though turkey is dry. That's my anti-turkey comment for the day. The turkey has to be delicious. All the sides have to be great, have to be the perfect host. All the decorations have to be in place, et cetera, et cetera. Everybody's got to get in town at the right. All these things are such a high expectation, and those are just Thanksgiving-specific things I mentioned, and I use this Thanksgiving-specific decor for this since we're right up on it. But for Christmas, there's so many other things, right? So many rituals that are a big part of it that seem important, that are a demand on time, a demand on resources. And as parents and as adults with ADHD, you already have a lot going in your lives during a non-holiday part of your life, right? You've got your job, you've got managing school, you've got all the after-school hobbies, you've got the things you're interested in, you've got your own relationships, you've got a pandemic that's still happening, okay? It's still applying, having a huge impact on the way everything works all the time. That's a ton of stress. That's a ton of things to manage. And then you throw in all these other variables and this idea that it has to be perfect, and that's just really tense. There's this packed schedule, as I mentioned, of things to do on top of everything else. Not only is it packed, it's also very different from how it normally is. A lot of the standard routine in day-to-day gets pretty shifted and moved around for the sake of these holiday things. Money can be a huge stressor this time of year with buying gifts, decorations, paying for more food than normal, traveling expenses. All these things rapidly, pile on top of each other and are hard to keep track of. Like I just mentioned, there's that change in routine and that lack of normal structure that both you and your child rely on. Structure is really helpful for humans in general, whether or not you have an ADHD diagnosis or not. And so when it's Wednesday and you think to yourself, oh, today's Wednesday, that means we're gonna do this and that. And then you remember, oh wait, no, today's the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. And there's a lot of other stuff happening today. And what's happening? And you look at your calendar and hopefully it's organized enough to remind you what's going on. But that gets chaotic for you and becomes chaotic for your kids too, right? There's an increase in things that can make us feel different and impact our bodies and our health, like increase in sweets and treats, and they're everywhere. I come to the office, there's still Halloween candy next to the office. So whenever I go in to talk to my admin, I also grab a piece of candy. Do I need that candy? No, but it's right there. It's hard to say no to it. Thanks, Felicia, for throwing it in there. Yeah, I've got a grandmother of twins with ADHD, and also as a daughter with ADHD. Okay, great. And then for adults, there's a lot of social gatherings that might include alcoholic beverages. These can make our bodies feel worse. These can make us not sleep as well, which the consequences of that just sort of build up into the rest of our day-to-day, right? Extended family is around. Now, some people love to see their extended family and things are great and peaceful, and I wish that for all of you. But I'm sure that for some of you, there are family that maybe you don't want to see particularly, or that things are really tense around, or that you're avoiding specific topics really, really hard, but you know that they're going to come up anyways, and it's going to be a fight. That adds a ton of stress, and also trying to manage your own focus and attention regulation as well as your child's is a lot to do while Uncle so-and-so is right there and he just won't stop talking, right? And then another piece that's relevant here that I think can be forgotten is our bodies and our brains, our hearts, they remember things about the holidays. There's a lot of strong emotions of memories of good times past, things that happened before, but also people that might not be here anymore, people that we wish were here, and reminders of them and how much they meant to us can come up during this time and add this emotional piece that can just catch you out of nowhere when, again, trying to manage all these holiday things. And that can be a ton to feel in any given moment, and especially to be surprised by. Grief doesn't normally come when we're planning on it, right? It just sort of takes us by surprise, and we have to learn how to regulate it, right? So those are some big stressors I thought of. I want to pause here and also give people a chance to throw in any others that I might have missed here in the chat. Also, people are welcome to like turn off your mic and speak with your mouth as well. I've just sort of been running off the assumption that people are scared of doing that, because people often are.
I'll say one of the things for us as we get older, you know, things change. We don't have grandchildren. And it's,
Yeah.
you know, it gets harder to try. You can't make it the way it used to be, but I think there's a lot of lessons still trying to make it, you know, whatever you want to carry on as a tradition and still enjoy it, because, you know, I'm going to be 68 next month. So our parents are gone. We lost a son, and it's just, you know, it's just different. And so I know we really tried to think of new things that make it fun or different, but it, you know, it can be hard.
Absolutely. Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that, Pam, that as times change and say, well, Thanksgiving is coming, what do we want to do this year? We can't really do those things we used to, but we still want it to mean something or do something. What should that look like? And that's can be its own opportunity for creativity, don't get me wrong, but, you know, can also be challenging and kind of confusing. Yeah, so I appreciate you sharing that, Pam. What about other folks? What are other stressors that might show up for you that I have neglected or forgotten to include?
I have a couple. One is the increased demands from school for parties and projects and even homework. It's hard to get everything done and people in bed before midnight. With ADHD, it's like good luck for all night owls. And the other one I thought of is we normally are traveling a ton. So we're actually, to Pam's point, we're having to think about how we do this differently because we're staying put. And it's very hard for my people to be in their normal space and spend time here. They want to be on the go and they want to be hyper-stimulated for the whole week. So it's going to be an interesting endeavor.
Yeah, totally. That makes sense. And it's not as fun. It's not as exciting, right? To not get to go places and to not get that stimulation and all of that. So I appreciate you sharing that, Alice. Yeah. Felicia, I saw you turn your mic on. Yeah.
I don't know if my chat showed up. Did it? That I typed?
It probably did, but I hadn't checked it. So your chat showed up about telling us about you being a grandmother of twins that were 5 and having a daughter with ADHD. I saw that.
No, that wasn't me. There might be another Carol. I'm Carol Owens.
Oh, sorry. I thought different people were talking. Carol, I do not think I see a chat from you.
No? Okay, once I type it, I've been just Xing out. What do I have to do?
Oh, press enter after you type.
Oh, press enter. Well, I'll just say what I typed. An additional stressor is if you do have company over, sometimes it requires overnight stays, which is even more to do. It's not just fixing a meal and making sure the house is clean. You got to have a whole lot else going on. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, overnight, fix the sheets, you know, I mean, yeah. So that's the part that, makes it harder.
Yeah, burdens of hosting. That's a really big one. Yeah.
You know, when I was growing up, we just people came over to our house and ate dinner and left, you know, because everybody lived in Houston. But
right.
But as you say, as things change, it's just me and my husband and my brother here right now because our daughter's in Arkansas. So They're definitely staying to themselves during this virus. They have two little girls, 6 and 8. So yeah, when
Yeah.
things change, and we lost my mother last year, and now I'm guardian for a special needs brother. So, it's always interesting. So I just was going to say the overnight stays definitely contribute to the stress. If it was just dinner and that was it. Yeah.
Sure. Right. Yeah, that's a very time limited focused project. Yeah, but having a spanning of being a host, that adds a lot. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that.
I
Now I
see
know how
one
to-
on
yeah.
here too from Karen. She says dietary changes, which you mentioned a little, and access to more electronics, which causes more issues. Oh,
Totally. Yeah, we'll get on the electronics thing here pretty quick. We're definitely talking about that today. Yeah. Yeah, thanks for making sure to read that out loud, Pam. I appreciate that. Okay. So those are some stressors. Okay, so yeah, let's talk about it within now. Hold on, I see a new chat. Okay, yeah. So Karen, Carol, your chat went through now. Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about distractibility and how this can show up within our kids. Many things intended to distract. There's a lot of things that are intended to distract during the holiday season, right? So there's things in the store, pretty things, pretty objects. Santa's over there. I think that's still happening at malls. Maybe not. I don't know what's happened since COVID. Right, tons of different toys, tons of that are all, and now also with the electronics, like all kinds of holiday specific advertisements and apps and things trying to get their attention, even more so than normal. And all the ads for all the things that they're trying to, for forever, marketing has been to try to get kids to convince their parents to buy them things, right? And that comes back to that money stressor as well, because it gets tiring to have to keep saying no all the time, right? There's the overstimulation that can happen with all those distractions and with the sweets and all the, like Alice is bringing up, the demands from school and also the things happening. So it's like the work and the play, because there's a ton of things to do and complete, and maybe fun projects that are additional, and also like fun parties and family school friends having parties for the holidays. That's all well and good, but can be a lot. Difficulty engaging in rituals or ceremonies. So for folks who might be of some religious denomination, or I guess specifically for Christmas, if you're Christian, sitting in church, wearing uncomfortable clothes, those sorts of things can be really hard to hang with. I mentioned the uncomfortable clothes because ADHD or other neurodivergent folks often have sensory difficulties as well, or sensory sensitivities. So they can be hard for them to hang, essentially, in these situations. Within adults, it can be hard to follow through on really big undertakings, like a big shopping trip, or you've got 4 different stores you planned, and whatever nightmare Houston highway you're on, whether it's 610, 45, I-10. I grew up off 1960. Like all these places are a nightmare during this time of year, and maybe you're trying to manage your time well, but then the traffic is even worse than you thought, and your patience is waning way faster than you thought it was going to. So it's just hard to stick with these things and to follow through. It can also be hard to keep up with creating structure and executing consequences when all these variables that I mentioned are happening, right? When there's all these extra parties or extra demands, it is easier to just be like, just whatever, do whatever you want, because I can't, right? Like that's where it gets at some point. Okay, now, for the sake of time and to make sure we still have time to have questions at the end, I'm going to start moving a little quicker. But again, I invite y'all to throw things in the chat that I might have forgotten to add on to some of these slides, and I'll check the chat periodically and then read them out loud. And Pam, if you could help me with that too, that'd be great. Okay, so forgetfulness and making mistakes. I'm kind of lumping these into one slide. For our kids, they might mess up a decoration. Maybe they grab the sugar instead of the salt, or baking powder, right? And they might mess up a decoration in some way, or interfere in some kind of activity. Maybe they break something that's expensive or was planned or was supposed to be the feature decorative item, the big, Great British Baking Show style cake that you planned, whatever it is. forgetting normal chores or expectations with the lack of structure. So maybe you've got it to where within the standard day-to-day, your child knows when, okay, and this is the time when I brush my teeth, and this is the time when I help take out the garbage, and this is the time that I help feed the dog. But when all that is thrown out of whack because of all the things you're attending and the things happening, they forget. And then possibly even worse, when the holidays end, maybe they forgot that entire schedule entirely, and you're starting from scratch to rebuild those expectations, right? To rebuild that structure. For adults, this could be missing events. Like, maybe there's a moment where someone says, you want to go to that thing? And you say, yeah. And you forget to write it down in your calendar in that moment in your phone, and it never existed. And then they text you and you're like, hey, you coming to the thing? And like, no, I'm not coming to the thing. I did not remember that was happening. Failing to get presents to require certain items because maybe it fell off the list, or again, that trip took too long, it's too hard to focus. This can be struggling with time-limited tasks. So I think there's a lot of things like tickets for events or highly desirable gifts that can just go, especially when you live in a really big place like Houston. There's a ton of people vying for these seats, vying for the this year's Tickle Me Elmo, whatever it is. And so it can feel really, if that was your child's most desired gift and you miss out on it, then you feel bad and feel guilty and can start beating yourself up, and then the spiral begins, right? And we'll talk more about that in a moment too. So there are those things for forgetting and making mistakes that can show up during the holidays. Let me check on the chat, not seeing anything. Okay, plugging ahead. Time management challenges. Within children, there's going to be losing track of screen time. So there's going to be, I have this listed on the for adults part 2 for this slide. Maybe there's normal ways that you would set a timer, or you have something managing the amount of time. And then maybe like, I have this day off. Can I please just play as much as you want? And then you say yes, but then they've been on there for 9 hours and you're like, wow, I didn't know they could actually play for that long. And you're frustrated by their inability to transition off of it and do something else. Someone mentioned at the very beginning, transitions being a big thing that shows up for pretty much anybody with any kind of neurodivergent identity of ADHD or autism or other things like that. Transitions are hard, right? And so for some of the kind of rituals that we mentioned before, like a coming to dinner or going to that church event or whatever it is, they might not have put on the things that they were supposed to put on, or brush their hair, or done the things you typically expect them to do, or they struggle to transition out of the really super special, exciting Christmas thing to move on to something that's less exciting, like a chore or going to bed, something like that. For adults, there's that difficulty managing screen time without structure for you and the kid, like I was mentioning before. There's falling behind on the long holiday checklist because, again, we have these very high expectations for ourselves during this time of year, and this idea is that everything that has to happen, and then all of a sudden there's so many things that haven't happened because of not structuring the time in the best way, and also just some of these things taking longer than they're supposed to. So even if you had been managing it perfectly, things are still going to go wrong, or still take longer, or what have you, right? So yeah, which all can boil down to this sense of not doing the holiday perfectly, and again, dealing with that guilt and that kind of stuff. Me thinking about parents being in that place, me thinking about how stressed out my mom would get when I was a kid, and both how sad I was for her and how it was also kind of uncomfortable to be around her at times because of how stressed she was. And I wanted her to have fun during Christmas too. I wanted her to enjoy it as much as I was enjoying it. Thinking about that is a big part of why I wanted to do this talk. Okay, seeing in the chat, getting enough sleep for both adults and children. Yes, that's another really big one. I think Alice mentioned that before too, when there's this lack of structure, when there's not a specific, time to go to school tomorrow or a thing to go to, then the motivation that's normally there for sleep might go out the window, but then it still matters, right? So even if there's not school tomorrow, there's still holiday things or things to go to, or, you just got to be around each other. And we are less pleasant and less focused when we are tired and we're not well rested. So yeah, that lack of sleep pretty much impacts everything else that we've talked about. Those ADHD symptoms or anxiety symptoms are probably going to be worse when you're not slept as well. Okay. There's a question of how do you handle 2 at the same time? That is a great question that I don't have the answer to this specific moment. We can come back to maybe we can gather some tips from the crowd at the end here of handling 2 children at the same time. I think with a lot of understanding for yourself and grace and expectations that things are going to be messy. That's my initial thought. Okay, so that's the time management piece. And then hyperactivity. So for children, this could be they get lost in a public event space or event. As a child, I went to the Houston Children's Museum 3 times and I got lost every single time. It's just one of those things that can happen, right? Disrupting social or religious events. Maybe they have an outburst in the middle of it, or they get up and they start walking around or are talking to their friends or whatever it may be. And then this is all further exacerbated by the sugar. They already have a lot of energy, and then they just ate 3 cookies, and you told them only 1, but you looked away for a second and they were like, bam, bam, 2 more cookies. And suddenly they've got a ton of energy, right? And then after the sugar, there's the crash, and now they're grouchy, not fun to be around. It's challenge. So for adults, there's anxiety increases from that buildup of energy. So if you're an ADHD person and you are using your own executive functioning to sit in place at that event or to manage yourself, you feel restless and you feel uncomfortable. And maybe you would normally get that out by running on the elliptical later, but the time for that isn't there because of all these other things that we're talking about, right? And so then that has you kind of in your head ruminating a bit, maybe about any of the things that we've talked about thus far. Children can become harder and more stressful to manage because expectations are less clear in novel situations, and they're very stimulated. So when I say expectations are less clear in novel situations, again, you've got all these structured things of how the day-to-day goes, and also they know what the expectations and consequences are at school and as well as at home. But now we're at so-and-so friends, family's Christmas party that we've never attended before. We didn't talk about prior what expectations were, what consequences would be. And so then they do a thing and you're like, what's a fair consequence right now? How should I handle this? What do I do? Is this going to be embarrassing for me to do what I would normally do in this situation? What have you? And so now, because of that lack of clarity around what either of you is supposed to do now, creates anxiety for both of you, for your child and you, and can make things really challenging. And again, to be clear, that's all very normal to not have talked it through in advance. And so just be suddenly handling that novelty on the fly. That's everyday life. That's how things go. Okay, so that gets us through our, just talking through the symptoms themselves. I'm going to dive into the strategies now. Don't see anything in the chat, so I'm going to go ahead and move on ahead. Again, there is a bevy of wisdom and lived experience in this virtual room right now. So if there's things that you didn't use in the past or prior holidays that have worked, please, by all means, throw them into the chat box or turn off your mic and chime in, and I'll give you lots of space to talk about, because I'd love to hear about that stuff too. Okay. So want to provide some kind of structure. Doesn't have to be as delineated as minute to minute as a school day, but I think having some kind of structure is still important. So still have a schedule on the off days, include planned activities and free time. I'm like, okay, so from this hour to this time, I'm expecting you to still make your bed, come down to breakfast, and then take out the garbage, feed the dog. And then for the next 2 hours after that, you've got free time. You can use as much as your allotted screen time in there as you want, or you can play with your siblings, whatever feels good for you. And then, we've talked about the sleep stuff. Try to hold the bedtime boundaries. Or, again, why I put the phrase some kind of structure, like it is the holidays, it is a special time, right? And so there is some part of you that wants to make it feel a little different, a little special. So maybe it's like, okay, you could just stay up a half hour later because it's Christmas Eve, right? And that's totally cool. Like, please, do that, that matches to your style and in your relationship with your children. But you still have to hold that boundary for that adjustment, right? Instead of, if they stay up just as long as they want to, which could be forever, depending on, electronics they're playing or whatever, and now you're dealing with the consequences of the sleepiness and the irritability the next day. So definitely want to try to hold some level of bedtime boundaries as much as possible. Incentivize desired behaviors with holiday-specific rewards. So again, I think for a lot of you as ADHD parents or individuals yourselves, You know, there's a lot of behavior activation plans and rewards for specific tasks for desired behaviors. And so now you can, you know, augment that with some of these holiday things. So treats within reason, again, not trying to over sugar the kids, but within reason. There can be some extra screen time because there is extra time in the day. And then, you know, this is sort of like this last suggestion, kind of a two birds with one stone. You're getting them to help in some of the holiday tasks, like decorating a tree. And it feels like a reward of like, if you can be really careful with some of these more fragile ornaments right now, and I see that you're being careful with them, you definitely, I'm gonna lift you up and you can put that star on top of the end, right? And you know, that's just a thought off the top of my head. I'm sure there's lots of other things you can think about that could be special or fun for your kids within that context. And it can even be, you know, maybe they don't lose the chance to put the star on top. Maybe they just have to redo something or go through a consequence and re-earn the star, right? And you don't have to wipe it out entirely. But I think this can be, there's so many fun things that we can use as stimulated rewards for our kids this time of year. Checking the chat. Not seeing anything. Okay, plugging on. Oh, and also if someone like wants me to go back, please let me know. Though I think this is also recorded, as Pam mentioned, and so you know, don't feel like you have to write everything down. There will be access to it later. In the chat, within reason, my husband tends to panic and go big. Then it feels like big things aren't so big. So now we use time and experiences. Okay, so to make sure I'm hearing you, Alex, you're saying that for rewards, you're using like extra time for things or experiences as rewards instead of like some giant thing or an enormous gift or enormous trip. Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, yeah. Like he gave an Xbox away a week before Christmas. I was like, you can't give that as a reward. That is not a reward. So we had to work on reining that back into like, this behavior gets this, and having
Right.
know what the expectation was at the time, even if it was a conversation or a text message between the two of us in the same room. It was like, I can see the panic coming. Stop, just stop for a second.
Totally. Yeah, no, I appreciate you naming that. I think that's just a good kind of behavioral recommendation in general when it comes to incentives of, yeah, things being within reason for the reward. You know, what's something a child would need to do to earn an Xbox? Probably demonstrate a long period of time of a sequence of, you know, they fed the dog and they stayed on top of their homework and they did all the things on the consequences plan. It's like, you know what, you've done so awesome this semester. Here is this Xbox, right? Versus, thank you for getting out of bed when I asked you to. Here you go. So yeah, that makes total sense. And then another thing you mentioned in there was like coordinating with your husband and talking it through. I mean, on the next slide, I'm going to talk about consulting with your partner, significant other, co-parent about something specific. But yes, in general, when it comes to consequences and discipline and that kind of stuff, it's really important to be on the same page as co-parents. Okay, right, and so then quickly, so yeah, that's right, I just moved to this slide. Okay, I had to reorient myself. All right, so involve them in the holidays. So what's important about this, and this is the second bullet point under there, prioritizing quality time. It can be easy for holidays to suddenly become about material things and consumer goods, right? I mean, if anything, everything around us is trying to get us to do that. If I went around right now and asked everyone in this room, what were your favorite memories from the holidays when you were a kid? Maybe when I got that one extra special toy might be a part of it, but I think most of what you're going to share is when we made cookies together and it went terribly and they tasted awful, but it was so funny and we had such a great time, right? Or when we traveled to so-and-so place and looked out on that one scene and saw the stars out. Right before we had Christmas dinner, you know, that shared time with one another, the love that you have within your family, that's what matters. That's what the holidays are about. That's my wonderful cheesy message for today that I do believe in. And so finding ways to help them have that experience and show them the magic of that instead of having them only focus on getting that $200 pair of sneakers, I think is really important. So again, this is also a great way to create structured activities during the holidays. Like before, I mentioned the importance of having some free time and some planned time. It can be, okay, together now we are making cookies, or together now we are decorating the tree, whatever your rituals are as a family. And then I mentioned here, making activities short and doable. You know, attention spans are only so large, and it can be kind of overwhelming. If it's okay, today we're going to decorate the entire outside of the house. I mean, that's overwhelming for me, right, as an adult, versus, okay, for this hour, I'm going to ask you to stand next to me and pass up lights to me as I attach them outside the roof of the house. That's what we're going to do for the next like half hour, right? Something like that. Give replacement activities when screen time is unavailable. This is a thing I run into a lot with my clients and parents. And to be clear, I've had so many conversations with parents this year about like the difficulty of managing screen time and content. It's really, really hard. And I don't have all the answers to this, I'm being honest. But I think it's hard when we say no to this, but not yes to something else, right? And the comparison I'm about to use, let me be clear that I'm not comparing children to dogs. However, behavioral things are consistent for humans and animals. If you have a dog that's chewing on something you don't want it to chew, you want to give it something it can chew, like a toy or a bone, right? And so it's like, no, I'm sorry, you've used your hour of screen time today. You can use these toys, you have your toys over here, or we can go play a board game. What sounds more fun to you? And there's like giving them the choice, which still is, they don't get to do that. Oh, they don't get to play that one video game. They're a little disappointed, but you're still giving them an element of choice, an element of voice in that moment. Try to maintain reward and consequence systems. I mentioned before, when things are stressful, there's a lot going on, how it's easy to just relax and let go. But the more that the consequence systems fall apart and you're not able to follow them through, the more the children will continue to test the boundaries and continue to see what else they can get away with or what other parts of the system aren't in place anymore, right? And so, again, some of this is going to happen. Sorry, I just threw my pen. Some of this is going to happen, and it's okay. Again, like I said, the holidays can be messy, but do your best to still hold some of these things through, or communicate afterwards. Hey, that was a one-time moment. Tomorrow, if I see you not do this, that consequence is still going to happen. Just make sure you know that, buddy. Okay. Right, and then I put in there, if you're going to be more lax and you plan that in advance, tell them that and make that clear and be specific. So this expectation, you know, it's your holiday, I'm gonna let those go. It's totally cool, go nuts. But these other ones are gonna stay in place, okay? Let's see something coming up in the chat. Discuss what is going to happen during the holidays, prior to the holidays, and engage the children in creating replacement activities so they have a say and agree. Absolutely. Very big on this. I think recruiting them in what are things you want to do? What sounds great to you during this holiday? You know, these are the things we've done in the past. Is there something you've seen on TV or heard your friends about doing that you want to be a part of this time of year? You know, I think that collaboration is so huge for both helping them be focused and stimulated during this time and also feeling connected to you. Because again, you're giving them a voice, you're giving them choice. That's such a creative, fun thing to do together. And again, is really, that's embracing the holidays are about doing stuff together vibe of all of this. Thanks for throwing that in there, Karen. Okay, so yeah, we talked about that essentially, of trying to be transparent. Other things to be transparent about are available time, how much time you're going to have to hang out with them today, and when they're going to need to find ways to entertain themselves, about holiday plans and expectations at those places and the things happening, and about available resources. You know, maybe it's like, hey, I would really love that one VR headset this year. And I'm like, that looks really cool. I would like that too. I'm sorry, buddy, I'm not gonna be able to get that. What are some other gifts that would feel really important to you? This is something that my parents did a pretty good job of knowing, you know, telling us you can't have a pony, you know, in advance. Okay, I threw this on like an hour before this talk because I've had 5 clients cancel in the past 4 hours. Something like that. And some of these clients are clients that I think should be coming before the holidays. And so if you or your child is in therapy and you think you might not be able to make the normal time because of holiday events, try to plan in advance and reach out to your therapist to try to find an alternative time to schedule that if you need to. Or if you know you're gonna have to miss a week, you know, make sure you've got that plan in place for the next week of when that next session is gonna be. Okay, strategies for adults. And then just pausing to clarify, Pam, as I was told before, we'll go till 8 and then questions for a little bit after 8? Is that? kind of
We're fine. We usually try to finish by about 8:15, but it's,
Okay.
it's certainly really important information. One thing I was going to put in the chat too is I think it's important, especially when they're young, but at any age, is to get them involved too, and help others. Take toys to the Toys for Tots, or
Yeah.
foods for the food pantry or something like that. So it isn't just all about what they want. So
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's another great recommendation. Yeah, Toys for Tots, Soup Kitchen, something with your church or other organizations you're a part of. Yeah, where they're thinking about others during the holidays and being caring and considerate in that way. Those are really important things to foster as well. Thanks, Pam. Okay, some strategies for adults. This has sort of been implied or mentioned or interwoven throughout everything I've been saying today. Expect reality, not perfection, for your children and for yourself. The holidays are a complicated time. There's so much going on, everything we talked about. Things are going to be messy at times. And so have grace for yourself instead of trying to be the perfect parent or the perfect holiday. Shoot for good, shoot for human, shoot for, having grace for yourself and for your children too. And I think if you walk in with that expectation that things can and will go wrong, it'll be more okay internally when it does. A lot of times when we're anxious, we can get really fixated on the idea that things have to be perfect and we're just white knuckling everything. And as soon as our attempts at control aren't working, then we feel powerless. The spiral continues, right? So a lot of my advice here or tips for adults in here is really about mindset of coming in with that expectation and with that kindness and self-compassion approach to things. Embrace the mess. Create a reasonable schedule. You can say no to things. No, really, you totally can, I swear. You're allowed to say no to things. So what I mean by this is there are going to be so many things happening, so many things you're invited to. Prioritize the people that you care about the most and who bring life and joy and energy to you and your family and your children. And then even if you focus on that and there's still too many things to say yes to, do your best to say that yes to the things you want to go to. And then when it's something you can't go to, or you just know it's not be realistic, it's going to be too much to try to immediately drive from that person's house to that person's house, and then from that thing to that thing, say no, and it's okay, and they'll still be friends with you. And if they're not, we didn't want to be friends with them anyway. That's the way that goes. So really try to, knowing yourselves, and of course, if you have ADHD, to know for you what's realistic for your own time management, your own bandwidth of what you can handle. And then I think, it's kind of like, I've had times we're traveling where I tried to go to 4 cities in 5 days and didn't really get to spend too much time in any of them, versus 1 city or 2 cities and fully enjoying them and having the true experience. And maybe I got to less places, but I had a much better time because it was about the quality as opposed to the quantity, right?
Do you have any recommendations, John, about helping each other with the FOMO, fear of missing out? Because my people do like
helping each other with the FOMO.
It's exhausting.
What was the last thing you said?
I said my people like to keep moving. It's exhausting, and they will schedule every waking moment and add some if they can. So I have a few strategies myself, but I'm just curious if you have some that you see that work.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, my first thought is to remind them of how that went last time, basically. And maybe, and that might not work if they had a great time and just loved the chaos. And maybe you were the one who didn't love the chaos. And so then at that point, it's like, look, I know you love that, but for me, if you love me, please, I can't do all those things. But if it was messy, or they were exhausted, or it was too much, or they were overwhelmed, or like they missed a bunch of things they actually wanted to do because they were just constantly running and just got to have a few 5-minute conversations as opposed to truly spending time with someone, I think gently reminding them, talking through, and you can always do that in sort of a Socratic method of okay, so what all did we do on Christmas last year? Yeah, and what did that feel like for you? Just sort of guiding them to that reminder, right?
Can I add one more thing? The other thing that
absolutely, please do.
I have long haul COVID issues.
Yeah.
And we kind of had a dry run of this with Diwali because my husband's Indian. And what I found is actually even all the ADHD folks in my family, including myself, were very overwhelmed by all the people being together because we haven't been together that much.
Yeah.
Going through airports and being in the hustle and bustle kind of put people on tilt. And so like maybe giving ourselves permission to pull out when we need to.
Yeah, I think that's a huge one. I've had that conversation a lot with clients and friends recently of like still not feeling quite adapted to certain environments or feeling uncomfortable in conversations they wouldn't have before, just feeling kind of overwhelmed. So yeah, I think knowing that you can leave in advance, having that permission, talking about that before, and then also even just reminding them about what you just said of like, hey, take a second, embrace yourself. Don't just walk into this without remembering, visualizing it, how it's going to be. Because there's going to be a lot of stimulation and we haven't done this a lot. We've been very comfortable in our homes for quite a while. This is different. This is exciting, but it's different and can take a ton of energy. Yeah. Okay. Good stuff, everybody. Okay, some strategies for adults. So talking on money things, set expectations with your partner about budget and spending limits and try to avoid impulse shopping. Especially for folks with ADHD. Again, that is what the internet is trying to prey on. The Amazon Prime buy now button is your enemy. It is not trying to help you with your financial goals or help you stay accountable to you and your partner's budgeting goals. So try to avoid impulse shopping. You can do this by, just never using the buy now button could be a boundary, can be only being allowed to shop or having a, like, here's my 30-minute timer and here I go on Amazon, and that timer motivates you to get the things you need to do and get out, right? Whatever it takes for you to specifically manage that. I start with money just because it is such a big stressor, both individually and within family units this time of year. And so I wanted to speak to that. Manage your own anxiety. Worries about perfection and spending can, and lots of other things, everything else we mentioned today, can increase our anxiety. Anxiety is very often co-occurring with ADHD for both your kids and for you, because there's all these worries about messing something up or getting something wrong or failing the thing. And so that's where the anxiety starts, and it can hang on for a long time. So do your best to keep up your anxiety management practices that you have, despite the changes in schedule. Maybe you normally meditate at lunch, try to meditate before bed. Maybe instead of a lavender diffuser, you're using peppermint this time around because it's Christmassy. Again, just sort of spitballing here. But try to keep up at least a couple of these things and ways that you would normally manage your anxiety. And then try to account for that increase too. Maybe for you, a good holiday is having extra rest planned in that schedule and saying no to some things, because that's when I have blocked off to rest. And that's when we got the babysitter and we're just going to sit at home and chill out. Structure your time as well. You're also the chaos of losing your own structure of your typical workday or school day, or the times you would typically drive here and from to soccer practice, what have you. That's also gone out the window. So set aside specific times in your own scheduling managing system, whatever it is, for the shopping, for the cooking, and for relaxing. I say this part because in grad school, one of the best pieces of advice I got was to, whenever you put either relaxation or something fun with a friend in your calendar, take that as seriously as anything work related, because if you start letting those things go or moving them, you won't ever take care of yourself. You won't spend time with people you want to spend time with. You'll lose all those self-care things, and then you're operating from a negative or from the red. And it's hard to enjoy the holidays when you're that burnt out, when you're that exhausted.
That's true.
Use timers, reminders, and planners. My life is organized around phone reminders. I wouldn't be at this talk right now without a phone reminder. Sort of facetious, sort of not. And keep checking them. So I say that too, because it's easy to have all the grand plans and making the planner. It's like, wow, how pretty. And then you set it aside and never look at it again. And it's not very useful at that point. Be available for your kids for play, for holiday, or for your kids, or for your family if you're here as an adult with ADHD. For play, for holiday rituals, and for customs. Again, that's just coming back to the idea of quality time and spend time is more important than the specific good, or that everything was as tidy as a perfectly organized or decorated thing. Having this time together is what means something to our kids and to us. Okay, that is what I've got. There's the thank you slide. there. I missed a hyphen in there, but that is the phone number for the Tarnow Center, and you can ask for me if you would like to speak or try to get on my schedule. Pausing now for questions and further comments from everybody. Again, feel free to do that in the chat or with your voice.
Well, first of all, let me say thank you. This was really helpful. I think no matter how many times we face the holidays, it never hurts to get a few more tips and reminders. And thank you to everybody for pitching in as well, because it is, we had someone last year on something about the holidays, and she said that she had actually gotten to hate the holidays because she made herself so upset over gift buying. And, you know, I thought that really is awful. You just don't want to get to that state where you can't even enjoy them because of the pressure you're putting on yourself. So.
Yeah, I think I've had moments where I felt that way when I was younger because I saw the stress that it added to my family or to my parents. Yeah, I think, and that's such a sad thing, right? It's like this thing that could be so fun suddenly has turned into this giant sugary monster of not actually very fun.
And I also think for our families, it's especially important to remember that, yes, our kids are different. They have different needs and expectations. And a lot of times when ours were younger, you just have to say no. You just can't quite, you know, get the Christmas crazies like a lot of your friends or their families, because you're going to pay for it a lot more dearly. And I think once we kind of accept that and figure out how to work around it, everybody's a lot happier instead of us trying to, like you said, go to everything, do what everybody else does. When my older child was the youngest, I'll never forget the neurologist. She said, well, what's the problem? I said, well, my in-laws think it too. He should be able to go to dinner and sit still. And she said, just tell him the doctor says he can't do that. I thought, you know, sometimes it is pretty good to just have somebody bigger than mom or dad saying, you know, that doesn't work for our family. And I'm a little surprised that you have clients canceling. I would think this time of year you'd be filling up like crazy. Maybe that comes the week after Christmas.
Right. So I was filling up like right before, like as of the last couple of weeks, right? And then the sessions that were scheduled for Thanksgiving week itself, a lot of those are being dropped. Sometimes because of like going to be out of town, or we forgot that there's a theater practice that day, or we forgot there's a so-and-so that day. Again, right? Yes, yeah, but yeah, I think you're right. Of like, I think things that were a struggle before the holidays will run their course or have their problems during the holidays, and my phone will ring louder in January.
So do we have anybody with comments, questions? Anybody want to raise their hand or turn their mute off? I see lots of happy faces, but no questions. I will mention one more thing. Ellen DeLapp.
Well, see, hey Pam, I think I saw Felicia.
Oh, okay.
Turn her mic off. I was wondering if she wanted to say something. It's kind of hard to hear you. There's like a, yeah, I can't hear anything you're saying. Still can't hear.
We're gonna change devices for her to talk.
Okay.
She's coming.
Okay.
Okay.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
My question just doesn't have to do with the holidays. It could be any day. How do you control attention deficit adult? That's my daughter, who's the mother, with the twin children. It's like I'm going crazy just trying to keep everybody with what's the word? Keep them sane, keep them calm. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I do, yeah. So you're managing an adult as well as two young children with ADHD all at the same time. That's kind of what you're saying.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
That's my high stress.
So totally. I mean, to me, that's like to say at the start, that's sort of an impossible task for anyone. So any way in which you feel like you have been struggling with that, I mean, I think everybody in this room would struggle with that. And so I think for starters, the older daughter, I think learning to start managing her own symptoms in some way, whether it's from coming to talks like this, from getting a book like Driven to Distraction, or going to therapy herself. I think as she learns strategies, then she can start doing them together with her kid. I think that's a really cool connecting thing for anybody in this room who has ADHD themselves and your child has it too, is then you can work on it together. So I think her taking some part of the ownership here too feels really important. So that's my first thought, Felicia. I don't know how helpful.
Okay, that sounds good. Did you say you had a book?
Yeah, I'll send a link to it in the chat. I'll just send the Amazon link. It was one that was recommended to me recently.
Okay. All right, thanks. Well, that's a start.
Totally.
Anybody else?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
Mhm.
Doc, thank you for your time. This is great. My camera's not on, not because it's just because I don't have a camera in my office. So I promise you we're smiling here and nodding our head north and south a lot in the presentation. So very much appreciate it. The one thing is I was listening to it, my wife is here with me, and I think what probably stresses us the most out in the holidays with our kid, or with our son in particular, is he's pretty hyperactive ADHD. The interaction with him and the family, both kids and adults, and Pam kind of touched on it when she said, just tell him the doctor says he can't do that. And that's probably, and it's really not a question I'm asking. It's really just more of just a general comment. Is that probably is far and away, I think, our biggest stress factor in the holidays, is just how, because every family member is a little different. Some are more understanding than others. The kids probably less so. To some degree, but that's probably the thing for us that is the most stressful during the holidays.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I would guess a lot of people in this room probably feel similarly, even if it's not their number one, is in their top three or something like that. So yeah, I think like you mentioned, I know you said it wasn't a specific question, but yeah, I think kind of as Pam talked about it and as you talked about it, for at least those ones who are more understanding and who are going to take it more seriously and who have mental health awareness and take mental health seriously, giving them tips on how to respond, or including them even on some of those consequences or certain prompts or things, reminders for them of like, hey, right now your voice is pretty loud, buddy. Can you bring that down? Or can you try to do this right now to try to use your energy this way? And I think so the ways in which it can become a bigger team instead of other people who are adversaries, I think that could help it feel a little safer. And for those people who just aren't taking it seriously, who are insensitive to it, that stinks and is a hard part of the holiday. And I'm sorry that it has to happen. And I think you do your best to mitigate the damage and, maybe keep them away from that person in some way, or manage it in whatever ways you can. But yeah, that's a pretty hard piece of this time of year.
I think too, that's one of the reasons that obviously I've been at this a really long time, but way back when I saw the first meeting in a newspaper, I was so excited to just be around other people with the same situation. And I just cannot recommend enough the support groups and the events, because first of all, it's great to be in people that understand what you're talking about. They're not going, ooh, my kid doesn't do that, or you're weird, or you shouldn't be spanking them, you blah, 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 blah. And so that's really helpful. I think you feel supported. And the best thing to me for stigma is the education. So when we're educated, we can advocate for others. We teach our kids to advocate for themselves. And that's one of the best ways that I know to get out there and turn the tide on this. It's not going away. They don't usually outgrow it quite as much as everybody acts like they do. And it can be a long journey. And so even if it's long, try not to make it a lonely one. And I do think that helps a lot. So one other final thing I will say, when people were, you had mentioned planners, Dr. Adams, Ellen DeLapp is former president of the National Organization for Professional Organizers, and she's on our board. And she's done for us a couple of classes on planners, and I found it very interesting. I was always a list maker, and then it seemed like I was having trouble, so I'd have a list for the office, a list for home. And after I took her planner class, it really has helped me have everything in one spot. So if she offers it again, I would highly recommend it, because I just think it takes away some of the stress, especially if you're an adult dealing with ADHD in a family. It can just help you from, sinking quite as fast, maybe. So any other last comments or?
Pam, I was just going to agree with you. It's immensely helpful to preemptively educate family in any tiny way that you can. I have found in my family that I listen to everything everyone says, and then I reflect back to them. I know we love my son so much. We love our son. And we only want the best for him, and his brain operates this way. So if we just change this statement to this, he'll respond better for you. That has really helped, because my in-laws are very old-fashioned. They're from India, and it's very formal, and it's a lot.
I can imagine. Wow.
So, and I've had them actually tell me he doesn't have dyslexia or ADHD. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, actually now they can do an MRI and can show you how his brain operates differently. I just really, as my sister-in-law tried to climb in the coffee cup, kind of helped softly redirect them. And my son overhears these conversations, just like all our kids overhear all these conversations. And it really helped him feel safe and supported. And he actually verbalized that. And I was like, wow, that's fantastic. So I just wanted to share that's a big winner in our house.
And so you're in chat.
Awesome, Alice. What did you say, Pam?
I was going to say, Karen put same in the same word, having someone safe that you can call just to hear you out so you don't carry stressors forward. And I think a lot of times those stressors can be our parents and our in-laws telling us how to parent. So I thought it was, you both mentioned safe. I think that's very important.
Yeah, safe is huge. I mean, whenever I do any therapy intake, first time meeting a new client, I ask them, do you have people in your life that you can be vulnerable with, who you can talk about what's happening for you, that can support you, that you can talk about everything happening? That's really important for everybody around raising an ADHD child, managing your own ADHD, and all of the life's other pains and challenges. It's just crucial. I think I want to throw in too that Alice mentioned when educating family, like as much as you can mention brain stuff, mention a part of the brain, and then give a concrete, like here's a thing to try, I think you can get a lot of more buy-in that way.
That is true. Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Adams. This was very interesting. It was fun. I love your visions. Will you send us the slide presentation for us to share? A handout format,
yes,
something
absolutely.
like that? Okay.
Yeah,
I know
absolutely.
we have...
I can send it to you.
Okay.
Hello.
And
Dr.
then
Adam?
Oh, yes.
I just want to thank y'all, because I feel like this is a great start. This is my first time attending a meeting like this, but I do feel a little less pressure because I took some notes on some of the strategies you gave. So I want to thank you, and I'm about to leave.
All righty. Well,
yeah, we're so glad you joined, and I'm glad that it was validating for you. And yeah, keep coming to these, because this is clearly a great connecting group of people. Last quick plug, this is in my blurb that was posted for the flyer. But yeah, at the Tarnow Center, I provide individual therapy, I provide family therapy, I provide couples therapy, and some issues I like to support people with besides ADHD are things like grief and loss and trauma, relationship issues, attachment issues, and family issues. Also just kind of like existential questions, and also things even related to like gender, like masculinity and things like that. Those are all things I'm really passionate about. So please reach out if you're looking for a therapist and needing some support.
Wonderful. And also reach out to Ada. We, really want to be your resource in the community. We have a lot of helpful things on our website, and there's definitely going to be more to come in January. So everybody have a really happy Thanksgiving. Thanks to everybody for attending, and thank you once again, Dr. Adams.
Thank you.
Everybody,
You're welcome.
Thanksgiving.
Very much.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.